Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the tax automation and compliance app known as Anrok. Now, for anyone who's watched my videos and courses on Suite Tax and how to configure it and use it, well know that it can be a very limited and tedious module within NetSuite to use. There are tax nexuses, codes, categories. There's all these various things that you need to deal with, and the configuration process alone can be quite involved to make sure that everything is appropriately set up. Then once it is set up, it is a lot of time and effort needed to keep it up to date and appropriately set up so that you are remitting the correct amounts to the necessary jurisdictions. It's all a very manual process. Now, for many businesses, it's simply not feasible to have one or even a team of people full-time setting up and manually managing the sales taxes and remittances for those organizations. So they start looking for an automation tool, and that's where Anrok comes into play. So Anrok is, you could consider it like sales tax on autopilot. That is what it's bringing to the table. And they've really started to carve out a name for themselves to the point where there's now 40% of the Forbes AI 50 list using the Anrok product. So with all of that in mind, let's actually jump in and take a look at the Anrok app. All right, here we are in the app, and just to be clear, you can already see, just looking at the left taskbar, there's a lot going on with this app. There are many different features that come with it. In this video, I'm really just gonna focus on a couple key highlights, and no doubt in a month or so, I'll come out with a much longer form video where I actually dive in, I walk through all the various features, how you would utilize them, some of the tips and tricks to get the most out of this system. So, let's keep in mind what we're doing with this shorter video. If we scroll down here, we're on the dashboard. And if we come down here, we've obviously got various metrics and analytics, but it's this exposure map that I really want to highlight. So what we're looking at here, now in this case, we're handling taxes for the United States. That's the map we're on. But if you're in another area such as Canada, Asia Pacific, or Europe, they've got exposure maps for each of those. And the way this works is, based on the coloring that we see on the map, it gives us a context of what's happening from our business's standpoint with that nexus. And in this case, again, if you're familiar with Suite Tax, each state in the United States is a nexus in its own right, as opposed to, let's say, in most other countries, the entire country would be a nexus. And if we scroll down here, we've got a color legend at the bottom here. So what we're looking at is every one of these gray states, for example, they're states that either we're not selling anything in or our sales have not reached the point in that nexus to cross the threshold, thus initiating the fact that we would need to pay remittances to that jurisdiction. So, and you got to keep in mind that for every state in the United States, they have their own thresholds, whether physical or based on certain sales amounts. It's all based on whatever is set up for that particular jurisdiction. So instead of having to particularly know every state and every nexus's various requirements and thresholds, all of that information is kept within the Anrok system. So it can simply tell you, keeping in mind the fact that this is integrated in with your NetSuite account, it automatically knows where you have sales, how much sales for each nexus, and whether you've crossed that threshold. So you can see all of these gray states, they have not yet reached nexus. Then moving on to yellow, which in this current map, it doesn't look like we have any yellow. Yellow would be a state where you can see that you're getting close to that. So you can start to anticipate, okay, great. We're now, or a future date, we're going to hit a point where we're going to cross that threshold and we will need to start paying remittances to that jurisdiction. And then of course, red means we have in fact crossed it and now we need to do the registration process. Now, if you're familiar with registering for sales tax, again, each state has its own rules and its own ways that you register, oftentimes on their own websites. It can be, again, a very tedious process. Instead of having to go through that entire headache yourself for every single nexus that you're dealing with in every jurisdiction, what Anrok allows you to do is if you've crossed, like let's say for, South Dakota, we've crossed, we now need to handle that nexus, pay remittances to that jurisdiction, instead of having to do it manually with that particular jurisdiction, Anrok will allow us to go through a short questionnaire. We answer a handful of simple questions. It then will take that information and it will actually submit the entire registration to that jurisdiction entirely hands off, autopilot. You don't need to do the work. Once that's done, you can see the color then goes to blue. So now the registration is being processed for that jurisdiction. Once it is finalized and you are then paying remittances to that jurisdiction, you can see we have green. So we can see automatically just looking at this, we've got several states where we are paying those remittances, a few that we need to handle, and several that are processing the registration. As new gray states become yellow, we'll know we need to go through that process newly. So this exposure map is just a great way to, at a glance, even if you know very little about sales tax and you don't have the time to go through that entire process, you can very quickly see what your current standing is from a sales tax standpoint and know that all the various remittances are going out as necessary. Now, I'm not going to be showing you all the details of how that works in this video, but you can see on the left here, we've got transactions that will supply you with a full list of what transactions have been hitting your NetSuite account, the full amounts for that based on the nexus and tax categories, codes, all of these things. What will be the actual sales tax that will need to be remitted to the various jurisdiction? All of that will be contained in the transactions tabs with full breakdowns for every single transaction. Same thing goes for returns and payments as well as for the reconciliation process. So in a later video, I will go through those in details. The last thing I want to show you in this particular video in the app is down here under certificates. So if we come down here, when you're dealing with sales tax, there are many instances where customers and clients will be eligible for exemptions, so they don't have to pay sales tax. Now, anyone dealing with suite tax knows that for every customer or client that has an exemption, you have to know which customers and clients have those certificates. They're basically PDF files. You have to manually get them, upload them, and on a year-to-year basis, ensure that they are kept up to date. This can be an incredibly time-consuming process. So Anrok said, great, we're gonna autopilot this, where you can easily come over here, click and hit request certificate from customer. You can send basically an email out to your customers, and your customers know what certificates they have. So they can simply upload the various PDF certificates that they have for exemptions that will then come back into the Anrok system. It will apply it to the necessary customer records that you have in your NetSuite account. So any future transactions you have with that customer gets the exemption applied. Again, the entire point of this is to fully automate your sales tax and compliance so that you aren't putting in any manual effort for it. So that's a quick look at the app and some of its key features. But before I wrap up this video, there's 3 additional things I want to comment on that, in my opinion, really make Anrok stand out from some of the competitors. So first off, on the subject of implementations. As I already talked about in this video, when you're dealing with suite tax, it is a very involved and time-consuming process to set up all the various tax codes, categories, nexuses, make sure that everything's correct in the system. When you are working with Anrok, it's a 30-minute no-code procedure. It's incredibly simple. You go on a call with an Anrok representative. They tell you what to do in the NetSuite system to basically create an integration with Anrok. Once that's done, all of your NetSuite transaction information is feeding automatically into Anrok, allowing it to work as an automated app on autopilot. So you're not having to have any manual work making sure that that whole process is running. Now, once it is implemented and running on autopilot, there is still instances where you will need assistance, support, consultation, etc. When you're looking at some of the other tax solutions, a lot of them have outsourced their support team overseas. So you're going to be dealing with the Philippines or Pakistan or one of these other locations, as opposed to Anrok, which explicitly has kept their support team just in the United States. So their tax experts, lawyers, etc., anyone that you need to deal with on the support team is going to be located in the US, and you're going to be dealing with US time zones. And then lastly, there's the subject of pricing. Now, I'm not going to name specific names, but there are some very well-known other tax solutions that are infamous for having non-transparent pricing. So as you're going through the sales process with them, you're never really sure what you're going to end up paying them. And in some cases, you can be pretty shocked. And I know a lot of clients that have been unhappy to find the levels that they're going to end up paying their tax solution when things have ended up being calculated. Because again, it's a very convoluted process, so it's hard to predict exactly what you're going to run into. Anrok decided to take another approach where they make it very upfront in terms of how their pricing works and what you're actually going to end up paying. Now, in none of my videos do I ever go into explicit pricing, so I'm not going to list out what you're actually going to pay. It's something you'd have to talk to an Anrok representative to find out what is going to be the appropriate pricing for you. The entire point is that it's very easy to understand and upfront know what you're going to be dealing with. So that wraps up this video regarding the tax automation and compliance app Anrok. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I'll also have a link down below if you want to check out Anrok yourself. And again, stay tuned. In the near future, I'll come out with a much longer, comprehensive view of the app and all of the various features that are contained within it. So if you want to check that out, again, subscribe. And with that in mind, I'll see you in the next video.